Hi everyone, and welcome to the Bear Necessities. I am Bear, and today we are continuing with some of our previous pumpkin recipes by going into pumpkin bread. So sweet and spiced and ever so lovely, a little dense, but still has a nice lightness in the actual bread itself. Now, previously in the first pumpkin episode, I walked you through how to roast a fresh pumpkin and puree it and get it ready to be frozen so that you have pumpkin meat throughout the next couple of months that you can use for other recipes. Now, after that episode, in which I also did a pumpkin pasta sauce, so I showed you a savory side, I've also released a pumpkin pie recipe. So this just continues that with the next step of baking with breads. Let's get started. I'm making a double batch. So when you're making yours by the measurements that I give you and you do not get the volume that I do, remember that I'm making a double batch right now. So don't worry, I'm going to give one of these loaves away to a neighbor. So let's get started. You will need for this recipe either one 15-ounce can of pureed pumpkin meat that, most grocers carry now as just a standard. Or if you're using roasted pumpkin, you're going to need right around 2 cups of the fresh roasted pumpkin. It's actually slightly less for what you'll need, but it's such a minute difference, it doesn't really matter to the recipe itself. So just go with your 2 cups of pumpkin. That'll be the easiest way to measure it right now. And you don't have to reduce the water in this pumpkin, so whatever comes out is fine. You're also going to need 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and you don't have to use cake or anything else, like just all-purpose is fine. You need something with that tiny bit of extra structure, but not bread flour levels of structure, just to kind of help with the heaviness of the pumpkin. You're also going to need 1 cup of sweetener of your choice, the 1 cup equivalent, so stevia, Splenda, whatever, or sugar. I have a cup of monk fruit in here, but again, whatever you use is fine. This is your preference. Make it yours. You're also going to need half a cup of either oil or room temperature extremely soft butter, but not melted. That's your pick. I'm working with avocado oil. You will need 2 whole eggs, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and half a teaspoon of table salt. And then in here, I have you will need a teaspoon of vanilla. Now, on top of all of that, I've added some spices. You may just need the cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, and a little bit of allspice that is really typical of pumpkin bread, but I have to be extra as always. And so I have my ground cinnamon, I have ginger, I have ground nutmeg, I have grains of paradise, and then I have my allspice. So I've just added grains of paradise into the mix. And that just gives it a nice lemony, citrusy boost. It's related to pepper, but it's a fantastic boost, and it just makes cinnamon and everything shine. You don't have to get it, though. It is not a cheap ingredient overall, so there's really no reason to get it if it's not easily available to you. And if for some reason you choose to get grains of paradise, this is what you'll be buying, are these little grains right here. It rarely ever comes pre-ground, so you're also going to have to do that. Keep that in mind. These are hard little buggers, and you have to work for it pretty darn hard. Now, in my recipe, I'm also adding some freshly ground ginger, just because I like that extra oomph that it gives, but that is completely optional. You would use about a tablespoon if you do use that. And then I'm also adding, for me it's a cup, but half a cup for you if you choose to, of toasted pepitas, which are pumpkin seeds. I bought these raw at the market because they're way cheaper when they're raw, and just toasted them myself in a pan for a couple of minutes until they were nice toasty brown. You just add a teeny tiny bit of oil and stir it until they all have almost a gloss to them. You don't need much. And just cook them on low to medium low for a couple of minutes, stirring them every 30 seconds or so, and they will brown up nicely within just a few minutes. So let's get started. So first in here, of course, we have the pumpkin, and I'm going to add just a little bit of my flour, like maybe half a cup. I'm doing this just to help kind of control the liquidy nature so that it doesn't slop around on me, because I don't have a very big bowl. Otherwise, you don't have to do this. I'm just doing that again to make sure I don't end up wearing pumpkin. And yes, I can wear an apron, but I'm not. So there we go. So the flour just kind of, it's hydrophilic, so it just kind of absorbs some of that extra water. All right, so into here, we're going to add our sugar or whatever sweetener that you use. We'll just stir that in a little bit. And we're going to add our oil or butter, whatever fat you're choosing to use. Or if you're doing fatless, you can use bananas or applesauce for this too. You would use about an equivalent amount of applesauce if that's what you want to do. Bananas would give that very banana flavor, and that may not be what you want. And into that, I'm going to add my whole eggs. And I'm going to go ahead and also add in my ginger and vanilla. Just get every last bit of that ginger in here because it is delicious. It's starting to look like pie. So I'm going to add my leavening into my flour, just so it's there for now, as well as the salt. And I'm going to go ahead and put all my spices into the pumpkin mixture. All right, let's add the flour. I'm just going to stir in the baking powder, baking soda, and salt, and just add it in about a third at a time. Just to make sure it's incorporated enough. It doesn't have to be perfectly in there. We just need it to be kind of everything wet as much as possible. But you can have little clumps and things. We're not going to worry about those just yet. I'm going to add the next third of our flour mix. And while we're getting everything put together, go ahead and preheat your oven to 325 degrees. And you can grab either a loaf pan, or you can do these as little muffins or cupcakes. It works that way too. You'll have to adjust your times accordingly, because in the loaf pan, it's going to bake much, much longer than it would as a muffin or a cupcake. And let's add the last little bit of flour. And before we get it too far, the pumpkin seeds that I'm using are going in the bread, not on top of it. Some of them will show up, but I really want them inside, because on top of this bread, once it is cool, we're also going to be putting on a sour cream icing. I know. And so we want the crunchy bits inside, not on top. And just make sure to give that a good stir, but not too long. You don't want to develop too much of the gluten, because this is a quick bread, not a long rise bread. Just making sure I get any clumps of flour or anything off the sides or bottom. All right, and I have 2 loaf pans. You don't have to use a loaf pan. Like I said, you can use pretty much whatever baking dish that you have. If it's shallow, you are going to have to watch this, because you're going to need to cut the time down, because it will cook faster if it's very shallow. These will be a little bit on the deep side, so they're going to probably take the full hour that is prescribed for them. And I'm just going to spray the sides with a little oil And you can also butter the sides of yours and sprinkle a little flour in. And that will just help with the non-stick part. Where did I put that lid? There it is. Colorblind and clear things on white. It's not easy. So let's get our batter divided between the two. I'm just going to pour an equivalent about half way up in my pan and then kind of match it on this side, and then I'll just keep pouring until they match. This doesn't have to be exact. It just needs to be close. Alrighty, so let's even that out slightly. They will self-level though. And I'm going to get these into my 325 degree oven and bake them between 55 minutes-ish to about an hour. And I will test them to see when they're done. I will be using the toothpick method. And you want to go about an inch and a half from the side, so just a couple of centimeters from the side, and test that. And then you want to check the center. The reason that you're doing that is because you want it to be even across. So while it's baking, if these sides are overcooked and the center is still really doughy, you're going to need to turn the temperature down and continue baking it, or you can put some foil over the top and continue baking it for a couple more minutes just to get the rest of it set. But I'm going to pop these in the oven, and when they're done, I'm going to let them sit on my counter for about 15 minutes or so, and then I'll get them onto cooling racks, and I will meet you back here so that we can make the icing for them before we let them cool completely and finish them all off. So see you soon. Alrighty, so we are back. My cake bread has finished cooling completely. It is chilled through. I put it in the fridge for a couple of minutes just before to make sure, but it is at room temperature 100%. So we're going to go ahead and get the icing made. In this bowl, I have 3 cups of powdered sugar, just regular powdered sugar. I have a little over half a cup of sour cream. It called for half a cup plus 1 tablespoon. So I have a third of a cup of butter that is softened. And then I'm going to add just a teaspoon of vanilla and get this all whipped together so that we can have a lovely icing on top. So first, I'm going to go ahead and get the sour cream into the bowl with the powdered sugar, along with my soft butter. And I'm going to go ahead and get those mixed together. Little sour cream on my thumb. My house, my thumb, my rules. Okay, and it's just drawing together nicely, pulling everything in. And the recipe that I have here is actually for 2. So this will go onto both loaves. And just making sure everything is nicely mixed together. All right, so everything is nice and smooth. I don't see any big lumps or anything. I'm just gonna whip it a little bit more, give it a little bit of lightness. And we are good to go. Now this is kind of like a glaze icing, so it will drip down the sides a little bit, and then as it dries, it'll set up and be that lovely thick icing that is just so good, so bad, so good. And just get some started here. And I'm just going to let that continue to drape over the sides. As you see, it does a lovely pour. And I think on top, I'll just put a few more of the toasted pumpkin seeds. A little extra crunch, and they're pretty. So there we go. Our pumpkin loaf is complete and just a little extra sweet. I hope you enjoy making this as much as I did. As always, I haven't made pumpkin bread in ever, actually. I usually did muffins and things like that. So this was my first foray into the actual bread. And I'm excited that we got to do it together. It's beautiful. It smells amazing in my house right now. And I'm excited to get to eat just a little bit of this. Take care of yourselves. We still have a long way to go, don't we? In just everything. Have little simple pleasures. And until I see you again, bye.